People see a man in a tracksuit talking into a podcast microphone and think they know the whole story. They hear the voice, they see the clips, and they think they understand Darren G. But to truly understand the man, you have to understand the soil that grew him. You have to understand the concrete, the paranoia, and the blood that soaked the streets of North Liverpool long before the cameras were ever turned on. We are going back to the Grisdale estate. But we aren't looking at it as a neighborhood. In the early 2000s, Grisdale wasn't just a place where people lived. It was a fortress. It was a sovereign state operating right under the nose of the British government, with its own laws, its own borders, and its own commander-in-chief. In Part 1, we touched on the name and the infamy. Here in Part 2, we are talking about the weight. What does it actually feel like to wake up every single morning as the most wanted man in one of the most violent cities in Europe? What happens to your mind when every car that turns the corner could be a hit squad, and every ringing phone is a chess move in a game where the loser doesn't just lose money, they lose their life, or they lose their freedom forever? This is the tactical breakdown of the North Liverpool Street War. This is the psychology of the Grisdale general, completely unfiltered. To the Merseyside police, the Grisdale estate was a tactical nightmare, a no-go zone, that required a small army just to serve a simple warrant. To Darren G and his firm, it was a masterpiece of urban architecture. You did not just drive through the estate back then. If you didn't belong, you were spotted before your tires even crossed the main threshold. We are talking about a level of street-level sophistication that the mainstream documentaries always gloss over. This wasn't just kids on bikes. There were lookouts positioned on strategic corners with military-grade precision. There were runners who knew the blind spots, the hidden alleyways, and the dead ends better than the back of their own hands. The community itself, whether driven by deeply ingrained loyalty, a shared hatred for the authorities, or sheer, paralyzing fear, operated under a code of absolute silence. The police weren't treated as law enforcement, they were treated as an invading army. Darren wasn't just a tough guy. Liverpool is full of tough guys. Darren was an architect of influence. He understood the fundamental rule of the streets that many others forgot: information is infinitely more valuable than ammunition. If you know who is coming, how many are coming, and what route they are taking before they even hit the main road, you own the battlefield. Let's look at the pancake incidents. In street terms, these were the moments where rival firms, heavily armed and looking to make a name for themselves, tried to bridge the gap and strike at the heart of the estate. They were met with a wall of North Liverpool resistance that was as coordinated as any infantry unit. It wasn't just random, chaotic shootouts, it was coordinated defense. This was urban warfare playing out in the shadows of residential blocks, where the stakes were life or death and the battlefield was the local park or the street corner. But as the 2004 feud ignited, the game fundamentally changed. This wasn't just about drugs, and it wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about respect, the single most expensive and dangerous currency in the Liverpool underworld. When that currency is devalued, people die. When the guns came out and the grenades started going off, the mental tax became unbearable for most. This is the detail the media ignores: the sheer, crushing psychological pressure of living in that environment. Imagine being Darren G during the height of the cell site tracking era. The police were heavily investing in new technology, using every bit of digital surveillance they had, triangulating signals, monitoring frequencies, and trying to pin him down through his digital footprint. At the exact same time, his rivals were hunting him with much more lethal intentions. Every single day was a chess match played on a razor's edge. Every move Darren made had to be calculated 3 steps ahead. If he appeared in public, it was a deliberate message of strength, a signal that he wasn't hiding. If he stayed hidden, it was perceived as a threat, a sign that he was plotting a counterstrike. We're talking about the Grisdale siege mentality. It was the exhausting reality of keeping an iron grip on an entire estate while the world outside, the press, the politicians, and the rivals, was screaming for your downfall. You don't sleep. You don't relax. You survive. You check your mirrors. You watch the shadows. You live in a state of high alert that would break most men in a week. Darren did it for years. But eventually, the system always collects its debt. Then came the fall, the arrest, the high-profile trial that gripped the city. And finally, the Category A life sentence. When Darren was finally taken off the board, the authorities thought they had won. They thought they had broken the back of the firm and the spirit of the general. But a man like that doesn't stop being a leader just because the walls get thicker and the doors are made of solid steel. Part 2 takes you inside the psychological toll of the UK high-security prison estate. Most men buckle under that kind of pressure. The sensory deprivation, the extreme violence of the wings, the loss of control, and the constant threat from other high-profile inmates, it drives people to lose their minds, or it strips away their influence completely until they are just another number in the system. But Darren didn't break. He evolved. He used that time to study the system that caged him. We are looking at how a man navigates the lethal politics of places like Belmarsh or Whitemoor. You do not survive in the UK's most dangerous wings by being the loudest guy in the room or the most aggressive. You survive by being the most calculated. You survive by understanding the leverage, the unspoken hierarchies, and the rules of the yard that are never written down but are strictly enforced. This is where the man we see today was truly forged. The street general died in those cells, and something else was born in the silence of a long-term stretch. When you are stripped of your clothes, your phone, and your freedom, the only thing you have left to your name is your reputation. You guard it with your life because, in there, it's the only armor you have. And that brings us to the transition, the rebirth into the digital age. Today, we see him in the era of scheme talk. He has successfully transitioned from the blood-soaked streets of Everton to the digital screens of millions. But look closely at the man talking on those podcasts. Look at the way he carries himself. The eyes are the exact same as they were in 2004. The way he scans a room, the way he analyzes a situation, the way he measures his words, it is still entirely tactical. He has gone from controlling a physical estate to commanding a massive global audience. Is this a redemption story? Is he trying to make amends for the chaos of the past? Or is this just a brand new way to play the game on a much larger board? Darren G has become a philosopher of the streets. He sits down and warns the next generation about the pact with the devil that comes with the gangster lifestyle. He tells them that the money isn't worth the paranoia, and the respect isn't worth the cage. He speaks with the undeniable authority of someone who actually stood at the very gates of hell, looked the devil in the eye, and didn't blink. We are witnessing his media war. He uses his platform to hold the justice system accountable, to call out the hypocrisy of the authorities who he claims used him to further their own agendas, while never, ever forgetting where he came from or the things he had to do to survive it. Darren G remains a deeply polarizing figure. To some, he is a villain, a remnant of a dark and violent chapter in Liverpool's history. To others, he is the ultimate survivor, a man who beat the streets and then beat the system that was designed to consume him. But one thing is absolutely undeniable. You cannot tell the modern history of Liverpool without mentioning the name G. The Grisdale era is over. The old buildings might be gone, replaced by new developments and fresh paint. But the legend, the tactics, and the scars remain etched into the pavement. This was part 2 of the Darren G deep dive. We've looked at the architecture of the war, the psychology of the feud, and his transition into a media powerhouse. But there is still more to the story. What do you want to see in part 3? Should we break down the specific rivalries and the names involved? Should we go deeper into the untold stories of his time inside the Category A system and the famous faces he met behind those walls? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. This is Scheme Talk. We don't just tell the stories the media feeds you. We break down the cold, hard reality of the streets. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next drop. The General isn't done talking, and neither are we. Stay savage. See you in the next one.